We have a guest in the studio, presidential candidate Professor George WAJACKOYAH of the Roots Party. Before we welcome and introduce him to the show, let's hear the day's proverb.
From Party. Mm-hmm. Yes, part of the Lamu Archipelago.
That one.
What does it do? That many islands in one place.
Appalachians of Archipelago.
See, knew you guys would get it. Okay. Kiswahili, then interpreted. Amani haipatikani ila kwa ncha ya upanga.
That's a what?
Amani haipatikani
No,
ila.
the last thing you said, mchwa.
NCH ncha.
Ah, okay.
The point, the tip of the sword. Ncha ya upanga. Panga as in machete.
Got it.
Right? Peace comes not save by the point of the sword. Excellency, what do you think of what do you think of the proverb?
Have you heard this proverb before, Prof?
Not at all, but if you translate it in Luya, I think I'll be able to grasp it.
You may, eh?
Or Kiganda.
Or Kiganda.
Or even Luo.
We were, well, we here being me representing my colleagues, of this view that sometimes a sword or a machete is used either for some industrial use, domestic use, but it's also a weapon. And sometimes just by having it or pointing it at someone, pointing the tip, it can be a threat. And we're saying that that threat sometimes brings about peace, because the possibility of someone actually using that particular sword or machete on you will, should we say, usher you in the direction of suing for peace rather than continuing with the disagreement.
You make me remember the army sword.
Yes.
The ceremonial sword.
The one the president is given.
Yes, it has also some other symbolic meanings. But first of all, you have to excuse me because my voice is gone. This is how I make my living, and this is why. This is what makes me reach out to members of the public. But a sword has been symbolic in so many ways. One of the ways that I look at is during the Roman Empire kind of playwrights, where the sword was symbolizing some kind of gymnastic, futuristic, aquaristic kind of message to the audience, in that you can either use it to demonstrate, to achieve, to bring solace within the environment by making it as a token of semantic romance. You are romancing with the sword. You're showing the queen. You are demonstrating before the king. This is how loyal we are to your kingdom, and this is how prepared we are. Maybe that kind of narrative may also make or create some kind of sense.
It does, actually. It does.
Sense.
Professor George WAJACKOYAH, welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Is it very hot?
Not so.
Not right now.
I do understand. And thank you for inviting me.
It's good to have you on the show. And you have really created quite a buzz with your presidential candidacy this time.
Right.
And we've been wanting to have this conversation with you. So we are actually privileged that you are here with us today.
Thank you.
Let's start with Professor George WAJACKOYAH decides, I would like to run for president.
Right.
When did this thought first cross your mind?
Thank you very much for inviting me in this studio. And I think I'll try to speak slowly, because normally when I'm irritated through nice and sweet words, the same way Solomon, when Solomon was writing his Solomonic poems to his mistresses or girlfriends, he used to bring in the language of kalamus, which means bang, which is symbolic to the Israelis, to the confederation of Judaism, passing the message, telling people this is what is going to be in future. As far as I'm concerned, I can't say much. What I know is that part of the world liberation has actually entailed my services. I've been involved in liberation movements when I was in exile in Britain. I've been involved in liberation movements in SWAPO, Mozambique, and most recently the Chiapas in Mexico, where I was part of those behind the brain of Sub-Commandant Marcos, when he was fighting for the Chiapa revolutionary rights. And that informs you why I represent political agitations, or those who are fighting for freedoms. One of the elements or people are the Chadema party in Tanzania, which I represent. I also represent the people of Ethiopia, the Tigrays, against the insurgents of the Ethiopian government, which actually caused an insurrection within the domain of Tigray. I've also been involved in Chad. I was also one of the first lawyers for the SPLA in Southern Sudan. And I've also played a big role in liberation of this country through Raila Odinga and group Koigi Wamwere, Raila Odinga, Wanyiri Kihoro, while we were living in London. So the issue of becoming a president was not really very important. The issue was, how do we impact the skills we have acquired while outside? How do we come back to the country that we have grown in and known how the system works, given the fact that I was in the intelligence for a very, very long time working under Kanyotu. So those things impacted me. But above all, what made me think of this was the sufferance I went through in UK, where I was a refugee, a grave digger, security guard, and I did a lot and I suffered a lot. So that in me forced me to find out what we can do rather than following, rather than jumping up and down like a frog. Why did you come back and bring that experience?
You talk about freedoms in some of these societies, looking at South Sudan, looking at Chad, looking at Ethiopia, and then coming off of freedoms fighting for in Kenya. Now, looking towards the presidency, or looking towards these campaigns that we are, in the throes of right now, are there still freedoms that you think ought to be fought for in Kenya?
Absolutely.
And what are those?
Kenya is not free. Kenya imeshikwa na mateka. It's under siege of the political class. People who think that they can give direction for this country forever. If you look at them, they have come up with decisive and divisional classic politics. You'll find out that now my opponents today have already divided the country into themselves. And if you look at the people they have appointed in their supposedly to be cabinet, you look at the Kenya Kwanza, you look at the 70% and the 30% in Western, you look at Raila Odinga, these are the same people. Now, does it mean that Kenyans are going to vote blindly while they know that they are going to have a repetitive psychophancy of lunacy, doing the same thing over and over again? No. Kenyans have seen now the real animal that they have been dealing with. They come camouflaged in so many ways. They come thinking that they're the best to lead the country. They were born with a silver spoon to lead. If my father is not in, I am in. If not, my mistress is in. If not, my wife is in. Come on. This lunacy has got to stop. And that's why I came up and I said, you know what? Even if we have so many people who are capable, let me come in and lead the way. And that's why you see now the modern classic revolution. In the old methodology could have entailed the armed forces to probably in countries like West Africa to take over, to remove this lunacy. If you look at the Chinese, look at what is happening in terms of economics. There's no liberation at all. We are still being over-reliantly, zealously dependent on this country. And who is making us to depend on countries like China? It's the same people, right? The Constitution says, look at me, design me with my acceptance. Let me participate. A few men go into the plane, get into the plane, go through those countries like China, and they come back with a package. Oh, this is for Kenya. We shall meet constitution or a commission to look into this. And then you see police wearing what? You see roads building, the infrastructure being brought in. Very encamped infrastructure. Look at Thika Road. Look at the bypass and the entry point on the freeways. These are death trap. You just, when you're merging into the main highway, you just come in and boom, and the car can run over you. We have civil engineer graduates.
So where is the failure?
The failure is leadership. The failure is the president. The failure is cabinet. The failure is so-called civil servant. The failure is autocracy. The failure is corruption. The failure is lunacy. And I hope Communications Authority will not take you under task because they always monitor where I am.
You know, you started by telling us that you worked with some of these people. You've worked with, for example, Raila Odinga. You've worked with those that have fought for the second liberation. And yet now you're saying that those are the ones that have failed us.
Yes, because...
So at what point did you realize that they're failing us?
It's an unfortunate situation that I worked with the likes of Odinga when we were in exile. we were there, they were in. It's like a graveyard. Those who are buried are in, sleeping. They can't wake up. They can't come out because there is a wall of silence. In which case, that was the wall of silence in Kenya because we were outside. We wanted to come in, but the regime will not allow us. So we trusted these folks. We spoke to them, and we were like, what are we going to do there? We financed their trips, financed their accommodation, financed their security, and we had all legitimate hopes on them. Then they came in and they got it. What did they do with it? What can they show us? Rather than having that sympathy, oh, I fought, I was jail. I was also in jail. I may not have been in the real jail. I was in city mortuary most of the time after Dr. Uko's death, and that's why I have some problems with breathing. So does it mean that we were not in jail? Jail for what? Fighting for this country, right? Then these folks come here, and then they bring in an ideology enhancing in capitalism of the highest order. I'm not saying capitalism is bad, but if unchecked, it's very horrible. They bring in the Chinese, they have cocktails, and then they dance at the expense of people's graves. Those people are unemployed in this country. They're already buried, and these people are dancing on their grave. We cannot allow that.
You know, the struggle for what we call a second liberation, I think, marks the struggle that I think not just a country like ours, but humanity must have if they wish to have their lives improved. Because I think, one, there is no perfect system, and even the good systems need a check and balance. You were in the UK, I think you'd know this.
US also.
In the US, in fact, it's just as well you are there, same. Wonderful countries, but the check and balance is always there. Now, the things you are saying bear great semblance to the truth that one sees if one lives in this country. But Prof, everything you've said is what very many people who want the same position as you say. How then do we know that, should you ascend to that seat of the presidency, that you will be different?
I think I will be dictator and economic. The only difference is that I'm going to be a dictator on corruption. Yes, because if you look at my history and my background, it speaks volumes. That's number one.
Please explain.
And number two, if I may give an example before I come back to your question, how comes that Rwanda, which was not there when we left this country, when we went into exile, is now there with every infrastructure, every common sense?
I don't understand when you say Rwanda wasn't there.
Rwanda was not there in terms of the world because of what had happened before.
Yes.
Rwanda came in after Kenya had been independent for how many years? Though it had the so-called independence, which was coupled with coup after coup after coup, up to the time of Habyarimana. But look at what Paul Kagame has done in Rwanda. He's become an economic dictator, and he has also become a dictator on corruption. That's why he's able to drive himself to school. He's able to take his children to school. He's able to have lunch with these people. And he's able to plan the city. And that's why Rwanda has become a hub. What a shame to a country like ours, which actually borrowed money to countries like Singapore in 1966, Malaysia, and then the blueprint of Singapore was designed on the one borrowed by the first president of Singapore from Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. And look at the Kenyatta 1 administration. The NHS system in Kenya was the best in the whole world. That's why Cuba came to borrow it. And that's why the UK built on it. We were already there. We had achieved what we had achieved during the first independence. That was a shilling for a dollar and a shilling for a pound. Kenyans didn't need to go outside. While Malaysians were fighting, thriving themselves by sending their students outside the country, that was happening. Look at Botswana. Botswana became independent in 1965 and discovered diamonds. Look at what the subsidies given to the Botswana people. But now when we come here, what I'm trying to say in short is we lack experience. Some of these leaders have not been exposed. They have not gone through what we have gone through. They have not seen reality. They have not toed on the line. They are the suit people. They come in, go to Makerere University, go to Nairobi University, from Yala High School, and then after that they get a job, and boom, they're in Nairobi, Lavington, drinking whiskey in Cedars, big Mercedes-Benz, and living in a rental house. Then when you give this kind of power, this kind of man power, what do you expect? Do you want to equate me to that person? So what I'm saying in short is I've been there and I've seen what happens. I've participated there. I've stood for elections in the UK. And I was told you're not enough. You're not ripe enough to be a member of parliament for Tottenham because you have shown us, you have checked in this list, children 2, wife blank. Tell us how you got these children, and here you say,
There's no
wife blank. I said, well, I had not yet married. Officially said, we cannot allow you. Ethics. And that's why I've got solidarity with ethics. Solidarity with morality. Not solidarity with immorality. Leaders in Kenya have solidarity with immorality. So is the church, some of the church leaders.
Prof, I hear you saying almost then that your experience then has prepared you for taking the highest seat, that the things that you have been through as a result of those freedoms that you fought for, as a result of those experiences that you had, that's a recipe then for you to be in this position, as opposed to anybody else who has not.
Not only that, I advise sitting presidents, right from the late Gerald Rawlings, who helped us to remove Kenyans from here to Ghana, who are fighting for liberation in this country. I've also been, I also advised sitting president in one of the South African countries. And that confidence African governments and opposition governments have in me. If I can advise a president of a country like Nigeria to stand this way, I can advise a president in a country like Liberia.
Just please explain that a little bit, Prof. When you say that you've advised presidents or you're advising
I do
presidents...
still advise.
When you say that you're advising presidents, in what capacity are you advising presidents? As their lawyer? Are you appointed as an advisor, proper formal advisor?
Well,
or are you a friend to presidents?
Well, there are those that are my friends who are my classmates, and some of them are opposition leaders like Tindu Lisu, who was my classmate at Warwick University. Those are my friends. And then when you come to issues like, before I come to question, if you find opposition parties, opposition leadership in various African countries and the Latin American countries coming for my advice to them, it means that, and the kind of schools I went to in UK, among them School of Oriental and African Studies, which was the backbone of liberation of Africa, African neocolonialism from the West, whereby I met people and we sat with people who are now presidents of other countries. Friendship started through experiences that we were going through. And that's why when the talent came up and they realized that this guy could do something and appointed me to be the president of African Society in a school like School of Oriental African Studies, University of London, which is one of the top universities in the world, then that means that's why we were able to collaborate with people like Professor Wangari Maathai when we invited her to come to SOAS to confer to her the soul of SOAS, when we had people like Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, when we had people like Sam Muyoma of Mozambique coming in and I addressing them and them now picking me. Like the Israeli government, especially some of the ministers who were my classmates. If you come to countries, to world leaders, guru leaders like the Ravi of the Art of Living, and my philosophy from the Indian background, people like Narendra Modi. We have had a class of people who wanted to remove neocolonialism in terms of economic neocolonialism, like what the Chinese are doing on the Kenyan, by taking a few Kenyan leaders and taking them there, given the fact that you have seen what China has done wherever they have gone. They take over and they make sure they're in for good. I've foreseen this 20 years from now, Mombasa Port will be under China, and that's why I want them to leave.
Back to my question. So, for example, the leader of a Southern African country that you are advising, in what capacity are you advising them?
As a friend and also as a progressive, transformative leader. Do this, let's do this.
Okay.
And it happens.
You said that you want to be a dictator.
Economic dictator. On corruption.
An economic dictator on corruption.
Yes.
Take us through that. What do you mean by economic dictator on corruption?
Well,
what would you do?
We shall seek legislation to hang anyone who has stolen public money. China, which is one of the most corrupt countries outside China, they hang corrupt people. And that's why there's no corruption in China. If you look at Japan, if you just think or even dream that you are corrupt, you commit suicide. And that's why you see the rate of suicides in Japan, according to statistics and scientific findings, you find out that 70% of those who commit suicide are those people who suspect themselves to be corrupt, in which case they fear being arrested. That's China, they hang you. Japan, you kill yourself. And now let us now go to Europe. They jail you. But in Kenya, you go to parliament.
So what will you do with the legislation? What will you be seeking to do with the legislation?
Death penalty.
Okay.
Yes.
It exists.
We are going to suspend part of the constitution, and we shall ask Kenyans to look into it and see if somebody can come and steal your medicine, like Kemsa, and let one, it will be a questionnaire, let 1,000 people die. What do you do with this kind of person? Take him to court, but we are lacking legislation. And if he finds himself, they find him guilty through the appeal process, what is the verdict? Put him in jail to eat our food again? Put him in jail to receive our medication again? Put him in jail to be corrupt again? Hang the bastard.
Prof, you're a lawyer.
Yes.
What is the current legal status on death penalty?
Do I care about the legal status here?
Currently.
Let me talk to you. I have so many degrees in law, and I'm an academic, comparative academic, not just looking at laws of a country, the boom, boom, boom. Let's look at reality. Let's look at corruption. Let's look at those stupid regulations we have here, which make people being jailed. A poor man who has been caught with one piece of marijuana being put in for 67 years, like that case in Mandera, or being fined 63 million. No, 50 years, or being fined 53 million. Really? Surely? And then as opposed to somebody who steals from you, then he goes to sleep in a hotel somewhere. There's a special room in committee, I'm told, where when, or the courts will tell, or whatever I see in courts here, an advocate asking the court that, sir, please, let's not remand him in industrial area, but we would prefer him to go to Kigiri, because in Kigiri police station they will sleep. Really? Creating class, kind of? I'm telling you that the legislation we have is very punitive. Kenya has got a 264-page constitution. The US has got 8. But out of 8 pages, they have 700 years of that constitutionality, of constitutionalism, as per Professor Okotogendo. But if you look at the amendments that have happened, there are only 14. 14 amendments. In Kenya, how many laws are made every day by Parliament? And how do you look and regenerate those laws? Punitive, 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 punitive. Like now they are saying, if your car stalls or you make an accident on this Chinese freeway, what is the fine? Kenya is a land of fines, punitive measures taken against its own subject, and we have to free ourselves from those punitive, stupid laws.
I want to get it very clear from you, Prof. What you're saying here is that we've tried to deal, if at that, have tried to deal with corruption over the last however many years. So what you're saying unequivocally here is that deal with the agents of corruption by ending life. Now, if you're doing that, how then do you deal with issues of human rights and things like this?
There's nothing like human rights when you steal my food and sleep with my small kids. You molest my daughter who is 8 years old and you tell me human rights. If I get it, I'll kill you. And then you can take me and hang me up. I'm talking of those people who are really stealing Kenyans. Like today I saw in the newspaper, a civil servant stealing what he has stolen, building flats in Ugunja, Kuala, and what have you. That kind of man, there's no point. There's no point. If he's found guilty, hang him in public. There's no, as a deterrent to other people. It's no point of saying that tutakupereka gereza uende ulale huko nini. No. Mine is zero tolerance on corruption. If Chinese are doing it.
And that's what zero tolerance means.
Yes. Okay. Then if you go to China, be careful.
So there'll be due process. There's going to be investigations.
Yes, everything will be there.
Taken to court.
Yes.
Found guilty, hanged.
Hanged, or you choose how to die, because there will also be options.
Oh,
you want to die by lethal injection?
Shoot me in the head.
You want to die by cutting off your head? Do you want to die by chopping off your hand first? Do you want to take poison like Socrates? Or look at the Islamic countries. Go to Somali, the great Somaliland.
Yeah.
You can leave your money there and go.
Yeah.
Because Sharia there is
serious.
I mean, you see people in Sudan with half hands. Sign of what? Corruption or stealing.
Let's take a break on this note. It's 28 minutes to 8. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. Professor George WAJACKOYAH of the Roots Party of Kenya is a presidential candidate in this year's general election. He is here with us in the Situation Room. We want to understand what he is saying. He's saying we need to think out of the box in this election. We have had the same people. We need to have a change. And he says he represents that change. We'll talk about that as we take this break.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Nairobi.
Of course, CT, Muga, and WTF. WAJACKOYAH the fifth. Professor George WAJACKOYAH, Roots Party of Kenya presidential candidate. Prof, you have said very heavy things as we continue this conversation. Number one, you've said you want to be a dictator, economic dictator, dictator against corruption. You've also mentioned something about suspending the constitution. Did I hear you right?
Definitely.
What's that?
Asking Kenyans to look in the constitution again. Because if you look at our constitution, it was hurriedly made very fast, not translated in all tribes. Kenyans were not given ample time. A constitution is something that grows with the population, and it takes many years. If you look at the charter, the 1948 Israeli charter, which was a constitution made, a draft constitution made while Israelis were preparing to conquer wherever they took. You find out that the day they conquered and went to the Knesset, they looked at it and they said, no, this cannot work for us. All you need to do is to start afresh and work with it. And they did away, and they have been very successful. They coded their language and their philosophy and sociology and law on what was there in the past. They looked at the Torah. They looked at what had happened, the experiences they had had in exile, from the Mosaic era to modern exile. Because if you look at the word refugee, actually emanated from, of course I teach refugee law, emanated from the Israelis. So they have progressively looked into what happened before, the academic writings, the storytelling histories of the past, to build up to where they are. So they were looking in the past to build the present, to move progressively to tomorrow. That's why it doesn't have a written constitution.
So how would you apply that?
But I'm just laying the foundation. Okay. You know, I'm a lawyer. Yes. So now, if you look at Canada, for example, Canada has two segments. There is the French-speaking and the Commonwealth-speaking. So them writing a constitution became a problem. So they said, you know what, let us progress on day-to-day activity with what is there. That's where Canada does not have a written constitution. So is New Zealand. Now go to the mother empire, Britain. It works on prerogative conventions, where Her Majesty empowers her ministers to apply ethics of convention. Look at what the situation is. Design it. Let the people talk about it in town hall meetings. And if that is okay, then we go, let the judges look at it administratively in case there is any kind of misdemeanor in terms of people not accepting what is being laid down. So people live in harmony. There is the Race Relations Act, which harmonizes relationships between other ethnic minorities and what have you, which is not based on written conventions. But when you come to Kenya, they had to write something for us because we were primitive. And what they wrote for us was not doable in Britain. Double standards come in. And now with the yoke of Kenyans coming in to study, of course, there was that agitation. Let me go to university. Going to university was a simple freedom, not academic excellence. When you got somebody from Goto Simbo, somewhere in South in Siaya, coming to university, you are like a king. If we went back in holidays, we were like so. We were designed from that methodology. Given the fact that people like the late Arguing Skodek, who was the first African lawyer south of Sahara, when he became first African barrister, and we went to the same inn, I'm glad to say that and to brag a little bit of that. When he came back and he was advising these people, let us not write this thing and go in. We have so many ethnically. Let's look at everything and go the African way. They refuse. They say, no, what is African is repugnant. It was made repugnant by colonialist governors. Therefore, we go with this. So we took that approach of the written constitution, which has put a lot of burdens on Kenyans today. And if you look at how the constitution came up, the draft constitution, what have you, we had the so-called experts. Who are they? Learned people. Oxford, Cambridge, Makerere. Anybody who went to Gunja Rukwala Chief Center was not ripe enough
to be an expert.
To be an expert. Look, let's move now to Indian constitution, which is the best in the whole world, whereby a teetotaler can go in and become a prime minister. I'm talking of Narendra Modi, who used to sell tea on the streets. Now, can somebody like that become a president in this country? if he has not gone to Ivy League schools. No. Now, if you look at the framework of that constitution, you get these people who went out, they took tea, came back, and then they came and said that people were supposed to participate. For how long was that participation? That's where we are coming in. That's why I'm telling Kenyans, look, let's go back to the drawing table. Let's have enough time, because Kenya is not going anywhere. We shall go somewhere, but Kenya is going to remain. Look at the sustainable development of our futuristic minds and look at it and say, well, if this is the case, bang used to be smoked before colonials came, as a medicinal component of traditional healing. Mm-hmm. Changa used to be taken on ceremonies. A white man comes in and outlaws this, and it makes it repugnant, because it's not conducive to a white man's health. But he comes in with Philip Morris, grows you tobacco, or you grow tobacco, and you go on. So I want Kenyans to look into this and say, well, is this what you want? How did you achieve it? And shall give them time. This is Kenya. Article 1 of the so-called constitution speaks of we the people in the preamble. But does it really function that way? So we are going to really look into it and then ask Kenyans, what do you want? Take what you want? Or you want to maintain the same judiciary where the chicken gate versus IBC case has been there forever, where the counterparts were jailed in Britain and they have served their sentence, and here it's this way? How do you remove corruption from the judiciary? What do you want us to do? Do you want to go the jury system, where you can take over yourself and get into domestic issues and resolve them at local level? Or do you want to go to court to find a young boy from the university who just completed and is taking him, Mr. Muga, before him, asking him about the Luo heritage? Or do you want to go to the elders at home to find out what you can do if the matter is oriented to the traditional aspect?
Professor, I need help here. Whenever I hear the word suspension with reference to the Constitution, what comes to my mind is martial law. But from what you're saying suspending the Constitution means you're telling Kenyans, pause, you have a Constitution, but let's rethink this whole process of how we ought to go about our business. So if we suspend it, then what do we have?
We shall have what we have in terms of what has been there. We are talking of the Constitution, not the legislation, so that we can have the mother Constitution re-looked into, some sections, not all of it.
Not all.
Then when it comes now to the practicality or the how do we, I just forgot that word. When it comes to the programs that have been set in terms of legislation, in terms of parliamentary debates, they will have to continue, as Kenyans also continue to look into what is. There's nothing impossible.
So,
you remember, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. You remember the swearing in of Raila Odinga? Was it constitutional or unconstitutional?
You ask me if it was constitutional or unconstitutional?
Yes.
I have absolutely no idea.
Now, here we go. Yes, it was because of the preamble. We the people. If you entrust me with powers, you're giving me the authority, then I will come back to you and say, you have given me the authority, because the preamble is above the Constitution. It's the togetherness. We, the people of Kenya, do hereby. You know, a lot of people don't read the Constitution the way some of us read it.
You studied. You are equipped with the means to not just read, but to understand
to understand comparatively from other constitutionals internationally.
Yes.
So the Constitution is not there. What is there is the preamble, which supersedes the Constitution. The basic tenet of the framework says, we the people. That's why Miguna, my fellow friend and client, came in and said, you know what, we can swear in Raila Odinga because of the preamble. Even if it was challenged in court, it would not have gone anywhere. Now, if you look at the legislation that empowers the Constitution, that's a different thing. So we are going to go ahead with the legislation for a short time. Okay. Kenya is not in a hurry. So that we apply the preamble. And if you give me mandate through the preamble, the Constitution comes where? Second. So
something that I want to ask, and to move away from legal matters, because much as I get educated by it, if someone wants to be the president of Kenya, what would you consider to be the priority? You've mentioned the Constitution, yes. I'm asking the question with reference to education. It's a list of things. What would you do with the education sector, what would you do with the health sector?
Good question. Education in this country has been killed, the bureaucracy, by the academic bureaucracy. They have copied systems that cannot work with us. They have not gone to practical areas, countries like Japan or South Korea, which have got informal education. If I look at the education policies in the UK or European Union, and then I look at the United States educational policies, education in the US is not a privilege. It's not within the Constitution. It's not compulsory. It's like a driver's license. Yeah, it is actually a privilege, not a constitutional issue, where parents design the kind of education their children should have, the kind of religion their children should have until they become mature. Therefore, in the US, a parent designs whether to teach his or her children or her children from home or take them to a different set of schools in accordance to what the parents want. Therefore, it is not a privilege. Now, if you go to the UK, the education system is partnered between the local authorities, because money is given to them, and other stakeholders, including parents, including doctors, psychiatrists, education officers, and also the authorities. So it's an issue which is actually pegged on partnership. But education in Kenya is one side. The ministry comes and says it is this way. Parents are not asked whether madrasa education is good for the children, what have you. Parents are not asked whether they would actually bring in their input. As now compared to Nigeria, in Nigeria it's a different issue. Education is actually left to the chieftaincy as well as the tribe. If you go to the Yorubas, if you get an Yoruba academic from Harvard who has raised his children in America, there's a period where he cuts off that educational cycle and brings his children back to Nigeria to study Yoruba language and Yoruba education and Yoruba manners, so that when they go back to the US, they have that Yoruba identity. But in Kenya today, you can go, like what my sister was speaking very nice, and I'm here to ask her privately before I leave, because she speaks like my daughter. Of course, my children are born and raised in UK. You get a parent or a person like you, Mr. Muga. You came in, you went to school, you look nice, you wear a suit, marashi iko namna hiyo, Mercedes ndio hiyo, naenda Sidas kila siku. Watoto wako usubuhi ambao wamezaliwa Nairobi, wanabebwa usubuhi, wanaimbiwa haleluya, wanawekwa kwa gari, wanapewa Cerelac kama watu wengine tunajua, anawekwa kwa basi, anapelekwa shule, huko anaimbiwa. A child like that one is a distraction. It's a terrible kind of hybrid we are breeding for this society, because aki grow up, his thinking will be this way. So what I'm trying to say is parents should be involved in the upgrade and bringing of their children in terms of education.
Don't parents have the freedom to bring up their children in the way they like?
But if you bring us a mannerless child, if you die and the mother becomes a widow, and then there's those freebies the kids have been getting, and you take them back to Gunja, you see what happened to them?
Yes, I see what happens to them. But you see, the very rights that you're speaking of, the freedoms that you want people to express in relooking at the Constitution,
right?
It's the same freedom that parents will have. Now, whether it is in choosing schools, whether it is in determining how they ought to teach, because homeschooling exists in Kenya. The choices that you speak of, parents have. You are right in that they're limited. But you can either take your children to a private school.
I'm not opposed to that, but I'm talking of the moral aspect part of it.
I understand perfectly. I'm talking about the choices that people have, because there is no better way of expressing the freedoms that you say you enjoy unless you can actually express it through the choices that you make.
Why can't we do it the Japanese way? Whereby if it comes to secular schools, kids are going to study about robots, robotic studies. Doesn't matter whether your father is the king of this country or the queen of Maryland. They study the same thing uniformly under the government, kind of what have you, instead of one school having higher kind of epistemology in terms of the infrastructure than the other school. There, I will also retract that word from me and say it in the following way. If you have a government that has got money after we sell what you are going to sell, which you are going to ask me questions, I know, then we shall have enough money to put in infrastructure that will be conducive to the national policy of the government.
Okay, so maybe I can just jump in there and say then that you have plans to sell things, then should you be the president of the country, Professor? And then I guess that leads to the structure of what kind of government then you want to put in place. One of the things that you've talked about then is corruption. There's going to be a zero policy against corruption. That's for sure. That's clear. But in terms of the structure of government and how you want, you would see that it would be necessary to run the country by. How would that be? How then would you then spur the economy? How then would you put up these pillars for the very important things: education, health, infrastructure development, etc., etc.? What's your plan?
We are going to regional governments. Regional governments. We are going to ask Kenyans whether they want to go back to where Mzee Kenyatta left them.
Provinces.
We had provinces, and it's our view that we are going to have those provinces into states. In that, if you have Rift Valley State, with its capital in Nakuru, with its parliament in Nakuru, then we shall have counties within the state. Now, what will happen, and I will give you that as an example, what will happen in Nakuru is the Nakuru parliament will decide on the economic development of the Rift Valley State with either chief minister, or if they want to have a governor, in that case, that's so it be. Now, it is from that we shall look into the following. From the county level, we shall look at the county production. Narok produces wheat, meat, and tourism, among other things. Now, if Narok's revenue oversees any other county revenue in Nakuru, then the county government of Narok will work in conjunction with the state parliament in Nakuru to find out on appropriation of finances, since they have produced more, which means that the money produced in the county given to the county will be measured on their production, and they can use that money to put in infrastructure in Narok. And what I mean by that is we are likely to devolve all sectors of development in terms of, like, if you have health system, education system, they'll be devolved from county to state level. And then with the security operators, we can have state police and then county police. Now, if we move away from that system and we come to the federal government, the role of the federal government will be to look into instrumentalities. What I mean by instrumentalities is, if the federal state or federal highway coming from Ombaso and passing through other states to Uganda, what have you, what will be the role of the federal government? We shall look at the money appropriated, given to the federal government through vote by the state government to the federal government, which will be kept at a certain percentage, which will be used to maintain instrumentalities of commerce around the country. We are also suggesting that we shall move administrative city from Nairobi to have Isiolo as the new capital of this country. We have looked at Dodoma in Tanzania, how it has worked. We have looked at Abuja, where I used to advise the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, how things have worked there. So we can devolve municipalities in terms of development by making people now, by taking discussions to the people's door so that they can discuss from that grassroots, as opposed to the system here. Right now they are talking of devolution, but we still having the central government that is calling the shots.
Everything is Nairobi.
Yes.
As we conclude the conversation, Prof, 1 hour is a short time when you have such an interesting conversation. Let's talk about this marijuana business.
Yes.
You're saying, let's look at marijuana commercially. Are you also saying, let's legalize smoking of bang in the country?
Not at all. And even if we were to legalize smoking, my deputy has got the mathematics. We have two kinds of marijuana. And the one for smoking, they will make sure they remove the impurities so that they can sell it for what have you. But let me come back to that question, which is very important. The world has gone very fast, and I know that religious leaders, where they're looking at me. And maybe last night they prayed for me to rot in hell, especially with the bishop of wherever Nyeri came in to stupidly not reading into my manifesto, which shows you that some of these church leaders are very, very ignorant in terms of looking at things, analyzing before they open their big mouths. Now, when it comes to marijuana, if you look at 1 gram of marijuana and you look at the countries that have legalized on stock exchange, you'll find out that 1 gram of marijuana is about $78.
Mm-hmm.
1 sack of marijuana is 302 million US dollars. Now, if we grow a place like, let me say, our pilot projects, places like Bunyore or Nyamira or even in the mountain, it doesn't take us long to pay off the 10 trillion debt that we have. If you have 600 bags of marijuana, and if each bag is, if 50 bags, 50 kgs of marijuana is 3.2 million US dollars, according to the stock exchange market in New York as we speak today, then what will be wrong for us to pay off the debt at one go or within 1 year or 2 years and then make Kenyans progress in terms of economic development rather than borrowing 2 billion every day as the president has accepted or growing things that are not going to matter in terms of production. Look at a sack of maize, it's about 6,000, sack of beans and what have you. But if we have this, then the issues of corruption will be ending because everyone will have money in his pocket.
So it's about commercial.
It's commercialized. We
Not
are
for smoking, not for
and the church has taken me very wrong because they know that probably they came to liberalize the Kenyan minds. And I'm telling them that they have also to be put on a pedestal. They get free money, free profit. They own massive acreage of land in the country, yet they cannot plan for poor people to have some kind of economic violence. So that's where we are.
Prof, we thank you very much for joining us this morning in Kenya's Biggest Conversation. I've got to ask you 2 questions before we leave.
Yes, sir.
Explain your headgear, please.
Yes, a lot of people think that I'm mad, and I think mad people do things that are a bit different from those who wear suits and ties and walk and dine or what have you. I'm glad none of you is wearing that, but it's okay. I wear them when I go to court only. This is a form of resistance. At Iraq, if you trace its history, you will find out that when African Americans, and my wife is an African American, she's the one who told me this, when they were being taken on the ships, those who were killed were thrown in water. But before they were thrown in water, their clothes were torn and then tied on the head, so that when they reached their final destination, they could count how many died.
It could be identified.
Yes, identified. And then when African Americans now started entering games, the first basketball team that they had, they were boycotted by the whites. So as a reminder of their past, they tore their vests and put on the durak on the head as a means of resistance. It was not until they were accepted that this became a symbol of resistance. This is a symbol of resistance on corruption. And until corruption is over, I will not remove it.
Someone says that you are very good in salsa.
Yes, I'm a musician, and I'm also an entertainment lawyer. I have a media house in Rochester, in New York, and part of my clients are Hollywood stars. In Africa, I have people like Kofi Olomide. And I also dance. I'm 62 years. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't eat meat. I don't eat fish.
You don't smoke bang?
I've never smoked. So that means I don't smoke bang. I'll only smoke maybe when we are sworn in to purify. But I am, and having been a police officer, having been a chokora, a grave digger, jack of all trades, I dance, and I'm also a dance instructor in salsa. I just came from Havana, Cuba, and where I went as a judge. And then I've also been in Montenegro, in Serbia.
Wow.
I've also been in South America, and mostly that's why I came in touch with people like Sub-Commander Marcos, the rebels that were fighting for their land rights in Mexico.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof, for joining us today. Professor George WAJACKOYAH is a presidential candidate. He is running in the Roots Party of Kenya as the vehicle. Who's your running mate again, for people who may not know?
There she is, a young lady, 35 years old, no scandals, never been involved with pastors or let me say Catholic fathers. She's married, the husband is also there. Her name is Justina Wangoi Mamai, a very, very young lady, very vibrant. She's better than me. In fact, I may only go in for 1 term. And if anything, I will relinquish to her if Kenyans want. That's the next president.
Okay. Your final word as you speak to the country this morning, bearing in mind the latest figures that we've seen from the IEBC, less than 40% of the voters are going to be between ages of 18 and 35.
I'm just telling Kenyans of all ages to wake up from this colonial mentality. They should look at the future of their children, because Kenya is in debt. And those pregnant mothers who are yet to give birth, they will give birth to children who will already be indebted to the debts in wherever. If Kenyans want to be free, this is the only chance they have. And I'm also telling people from Western Province and Nyanza, let them not look at tribalism. Roots Party has killed the language of tribalism once and for all. If you look at the songs that are being sung about Roots Party, if you look at the movement that has come in, we are a movement which is not going to be stoppable. Of course, the big parties have tried to bribe me, and let me tell them very clearly, I am going up to the ballot. Those who are sending emissaries to me, especially those MPs who came to see me, and I'm not going to mention them, shame on them. Shame on those MPs from Kenya Kwanza. Shame from those elders from wherever it is. What is that? Azimio. I am not going. And Raila and Ruto, don't send me people. I will not accept. If you want, call me directly. Raila, you know me. I've lived with you. Ruto, you know me. Call me directly and I will talk to you. Don't send me stupid people. I will not accept. Thank you.